Hello you guys, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new around here, my name is Carolina and I'm very grateful that you're watching. On today's video, we're gonna get a little vulnerable and I'm gonna share with you guys my journey of healing from an eating disorder and how I ditched a restrictive relationship with food and a restrictive lifestyle to find more food freedom and more self-love. As a health coach, but also as a woman and as someone who shares content on the internet about food, about wellness, about health, I feel like it is my duty to be open about this because when I was struggling now almost 8 years ago, I felt so alone and I felt like no one would understand me. I felt like there was no hope. And so I really find that it's important for me to be vulnerable with my community because if you're struggling with your relationship with your body, there is a way out of it. And that's what I hope to leave you with from this video. I also just hope that it makes you guys feel a little bit closer to me on a personal level and helps you get to know me as a human on a healing journey and just trying to figure out life. This video has been a long time coming. I've talked openly about my journey on my podcast, Inner Growth, and also on short form content, so on Instagram and TikTok, but this is my first time really like doing a sit down chat on YouTube to talk about it. So here we go. I also think it's important to talk about this because there are so many women and men, but especially women, that have a disordered relationship with their body and with food because there's this big societal context that we live in that pushes out messaging constantly to us, making us feel like we need to be smaller, we need to shrink ourselves, we need to be skinnier, we need to be more fit, that we're not enough as we are.
What can I get here that has no sugar, no carbs, and is fat-free? Water.
Beef patty, squish it till it's dry, no bun.
Iceberg lettuce, half a cup of garbanzos and a lemon wedge, and a quarter cup of cheese. Ooh, cheese. It's Saturday. I can pick out if I want to.
Your butt is huge, and you have chicken legs. I think I'm gonna go for a little 10-mile jog.
Because the overall context in our society pushes this messaging, it's up to us to choose differently and to really question the patterns that we fall into and how other people live their life. And that's because even though something is common or popular or normalized, doesn't mean that it's right. And food is something that we interact with every single day of our lives. So we can either fall to the pattern of being at war with food and what's on our plate every day and letting those thoughts consume us, or we can find a better relationship with this thing that we interact with all the time so that we can come from a place of nourishment and of love when we are fueling our bodies. So this is another reason why I find it so important to talk about this, because ever since I healed my relationship with my body, my life has just significantly improved. And so my hope is that more people are able to get to this point too, and hopefully my content is something that can support you on your journey. Before we dive in, I just wanted to give a little trigger warning. If this type of content triggers you, you are under no obligation to watch this video. But if you're someone who wants to get to know me better, wants to understand how I arrived at a healed relationship with food and with my body, and just wants to maybe find some advice on how to achieve that yourself, welcome to the video. Let's jump right in. Okay, so as a little bit of context, for my entire life, I have pretty much been that typical type A, perfectionistic, overachieving, hyper-independent oldest sister in my family. I was my parents' first kid, and I was also the first granddaughter on my dad's side of the family. So that has always made me crave a lot of external validation, and it made me crave perfection. It made me want to present this image of being picture perfect, of having it all figured out. Also, I'm from Brazil, so I grew up in Latin America where there is this bigger context where it's very normalized to comment on people's bodies, comment on weight loss, on weight gain, whether it's commenting on someone else in your family or commenting about a celebrity's body, something like that. It's just very normal. And so there was this bigger context that I lived in, which kind of created this belief inside of my head that everyone else is paying attention to the way that you look like, and everyone else is going to comment on your body if it changes. And that was just kind of like subconscious living inside of my head. And so even though for my entire childhood and like the beginning of my teenage years, I was always like pretty petite and I didn't really pay that much attention to food or my body, there was a moment where things kind of started to shift for me. And if I really dig deep, for me, it was when I moved from Brazil to the US. I was 13 at the time. I was going into 8th grade, and right after I moved, I got my period and I hit puberty. Everything started to change in my body, and I started to become very aware of my body. I started to get boobs and I started to become curvier. So I remember that was when I really started to have more body awareness. Also, around the time that I moved, social media became a thing. I remember Instagram had just started being a thing. Everyone started to use it. And with this rise of social media also came this like rise in wanting to look good for pictures and comparing yourself to everything that you would see on your phone. And back then it was very normalized, and it still kind of is, to retouch your photos, to face tune things. So we were looking at just constant perfection, and that was definitely something that messed me up a little bit mentally because it started to get me way more focused on my appearance. Also, as an additional piece of context, I was never someone that was like very athletic. So I was never someone into sports, none of that. I was more the artsy type. I liked photography, videography. I was a yearbook girly. I liked dance. I liked art. And so I was never really into working out that much. But closer to the end of high school, around my junior year, I started getting into it. And it was mainly like for fun. Like I would go to the gym with my friends. We would do workout classes. It was very chill. But then fast forward to halfway through my senior year, I remember I had gained a little bit of weight. Honestly, looking back now, my body looked totally fine, like there was nothing wrong, but a family member commented on it and it really triggered me and it got me really self-conscious. And on top of that, I also was like trying to figure out my like relationship sector, and I really wanted boys to like me. Again, that perfectionism was underlying all of this. And so I thought that boys only liked skinny girls, and so I thought I needed to lose weight for them to want to be with me. For me, this is when I really pinpoint that my relationship with my body and with food totally changed for the worst. I became very obsessed with losing weight. And the thing was that I wasn't getting any advice from good sources. I didn't go after a nutritionist or personal trainer or a coach. I just found random information on the internet on how to lose weight, and it took me down the wrong path because it caused me to really over restrict, really undereat, where I remember I would feel hungry and I would constantly be thinking about my next meal. I also started to do just like extreme exercise, especially extreme cardio. And in the process, right, as I started to lose weight, the frustrating part was that people started to comment on, oh my God, you look so great. What are you doing? What workouts are you doing? How are you eating? People wanted to know what I was doing, but they didn't know that what I was doing was actually kind of unhealthy and not sustainable at all. So there was again that external validation that perfectionist me was craving so badly and wanting to feel loved, wanting to feel liked and pretty. So that became really hard for me to process, and it caused me to almost come to this denial that the things that I was doing were bad for me, because it was getting me what I wanted. However, I took it too far. And so going into college, living alone for the first time, moving out of my parents' house, navigating a lot of new stressors, I lost my period. I started to lose my hair really quickly. I remember being in the shower and my hair just falling out in chunks. And I remember when I got to college, that was when things were just like not good. On the external, no one knew that this was going on because I didn't talk about it. I also, in being in this energy, started to attract people in my life and social settings where other people were also doing the same thing, because the way that you are and the energy that you are in dictates what you attract into your life. And in being in this environment and in being in this denial mode and just kind of like avoiding facing reality, it got to a point where I didn't even recognize myself anymore and I didn't feel good at all. So I remember going to my parents' house for Thanksgiving in my freshman year of college. It's funny because I'm recording this and we're a week away from Thanksgiving, and I feel like every Thanksgiving, this is when I feel all these different things rise up to the surface and I really remember my story. And my parents had kind of like an intervention with me and we had this conversation, and at that point I was beyond denial. Like we had had conversations like this before, but I would pretend that everything was fine, nothing was wrong. And in this moment I really kind of like came to terms with it, and I was like, I don't even recognize myself anymore. Like I was covered in bruises, I had so much less hair, my face just looked like sickly, like I just didn't feel good, and I owned it in that moment. And I was really open with my parents, and so they connected me with a nutritionist. And I'm someone who, when I set my mind on something, I do it. Like, I am just that type of person. So I was like, okay, you know what? We're gonna get this figured out. Like, I'm gonna gain the weight back. And so this nutritionist basically gave me a plan on like what to eat, how many times a day to eat, etc. And I followed it. Little by little, I started to gain weight back and like restore my body a bit. I also was working out a little bit less in that time. And I remember, obviously, there was a lot that rose up to the surface because, as I said, I was previously getting all this validation on how good I looked from being too skinny that I had to face the fear of, oh, people are gonna notice that I gained weight. Are people gonna like me less? Are gonna think I look bad? Like, I had to really navigate all these things that were coming up, but I didn't seek out, and my parents didn't encourage me to do the mental health healing side of things. And the truth is that as much as having an eating disorder or a disordered relationship with food is about your weight and your physical body and food, it's also very, very mental. So as I mentioned, in the fall of my freshman year, around Thanksgiving, I started this process of weight recovery. And I continued down this process for a couple of years, but I still didn't have the best relationship with food in my body mentally. And I started to struggle a little bit with overeating at night and then feeling really bad about it the next day, and using exercise as a mean to overcompensate for food. So my relationship with all of these things that are considered healthy wasn't healthy. And in this process, I felt like I was constantly self-sabotaging. I wasn't confident. I didn't love myself truly, and this started to affect my relationships in my life. So fast forward to March of 2020, midway through my junior year of college, and when COVID hit, I kind of came to this rock bottom moment where I was like, I don't like who I am and how I'm showing up in my life. And so I went through this healing journey. It was the start of my inner growth journey because I started to go to therapy every week. I started to journal. I started to listen to self-growth podcasts. I started to understand myself and my patterns, and I just really looked within, and I started to do a lot of shadow work, which is basically about understanding the parts of you that you typically hide away and you typically feel ashamed of, and really just realizing that you have this side of you too, and getting to know that part of you. I started to do all this work, and I remember it really started to transform me. And it really started to change the way that I thought about myself, the way that I showed up, and I really started to learn about the power of personal responsibility and accountability too, and just really taking ownership for how I was contributing to the story that I was living and how I was contributing to the situations that I found myself in. And I started to call back power to myself, because when you get real with yourself about what's not working, that's when you can start to change. And I remember I worked with a therapist that was like from my Center of Psychological Services at my school for a bit, but then it wasn't like a long-term thing, so we had to end that therapy, and then I eventually found a therapist that I worked with for like 3 years after that. But when I finished working with that first therapist, I remember I sat down and I just journaled about all of my takeaways from working with her. And I just found the journal from June 4th, 2020, and I wanted to share with you guys a little excerpt of what I wrote. And I don't think I've ever shared this anywhere. So here we go. Judgment. That has been something I've been struggling with internally for quite some time. Fear of judgment. Unconscious internal self-judgment. Labels. Over the years, I've been listening to this inflow of information from people around me. Comments around topics that I have slowly internalized and have started to use against myself. For as long as I can remember, I have been anticipating judgment and internalizing judgment. I judge my actions because of labels I have in my head, and I have learned that labels such as right and wrong, good and bad, are simply norms that have been established by society. Women have been conditioned to think that there is a way they should act, a way that they're supposed to be, but norms are not universal. I can create my own norms. With regards to eating, I know that my actual behavior, what I eat, and how I act is not the problem. I now realize that a huge part of the problem I am still facing and growing from is related to these labels. I realize that I feel bad about myself when I eat what I label as bad or unhealthy, and then I think I did something wrong. Society conditions girls to think that they need to look a certain way, that they need to be thin and young to be beautiful, and then girls externalize approval. They think they need to look a certain way, change themselves to be accepted or seen as pretty. The thing is, there are no good and bad foods. Eating is context-based. I eat well, I honor my body, I listen to my hunger, I nourish my body when I need to. And whenever I find myself labeling any eating behavior, I pause, I note that I just used the label, and I remind myself of my context and accept it and honor it. Like, what? That is so powerful. Oh, so much love to 2020 Caro, because I was really putting in the work and I was really starting to change the way that I thought about food and that I thought about myself, and I started to have all this awareness of things that were impacting the way that I thought and the beliefs that I had around my body, my worth, my beauty, my food, all of those things. And so I started to really realize that I started to actually feel good internally and about myself and about my body when I started to do these things that helped me mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And so things kind of started to change from there, and this was for me a really big awakening and a really big moment of change. Even though I started to do all this healing in my mindset and things really did start to change, I ended up kind of falling to the other extreme a little bit, where I became obsessed with being healthy. And I kind of started to fall down this path of orthorexia, which, if you don't know what that means, orthorexia is basically an obsession with eating healthy food. And it comes from the words ortho, which means correct, and orexis, which means appetite. So basically, someone who struggles with orthorexia becomes fixated with the quality as opposed to the quantity of their food. And the reason this started to happen is because I started to learn more about nutrition, I started my health coaching certification, and I started to cut out a lot of things from my life without needing to. Like, I cut out dairy, I cut out gluten, which now I do actually have a gluten sensitivity, but back then I didn't know that and I wasn't doing it for that reason. So I cut it out. I also cut out like basically all animal products, and it wasn't good either because it was also extreme and it was also too intense, and it would affect my relationships too because I wouldn't want to eat what my mom would cook at home. It was harder for me to go out to eat. I also eventually started doing the 75 hard challenge, which is this fitness challenge, and I also was doing food combining, so I was still falling to extremes. Even though I was becoming more aware of this mindset change, I was falling to extremes in a different way than I had before. And so that continued for a little while. And in between 2020 and 2022, a few different things changed. I went off of hormonal birth control and I started to really pay attention to my hormone health. And I started to realize that my cycle health wasn't the best and my cycle was like really irregular. I started to do acupuncture, and as I started to go to acupuncture, they started to ask me if I ate animal products. So I slowly started to integrate meat back into my life, but I still wasn't eating gluten or dairy. And then come 2022, I just had this moment where I was like, I don't want to be extreme anymore. I want to find balance. And for me, 2022 was a year of figuring out what balance meant for me.
Hi, my name's Carolina, and here's what I've learned about balance. I've found that true balance is about staying consistent with the things that make me feel really good, but also leaving room for change and for adjustments on days that my body needs something different. It's about allowing myself to enjoy the finer things in life without guilting myself for not looking perfect or doing things to a T. It's about allowing myself to enjoy them fully without judgment or labels about it being good or bad. So true balance to me is about living without labels. And doing that has freed me from this internal pressure to restrict certain things from my life in order to perfectly fit a box. And it's allowed me to do a little bit of everything that I feel called to. So my hope for you is that you remove labels from your life and free yourself to experience balance.
So I removed all these restrictions. It was like, I am not going to be cutting out dairy or gluten from my life anymore. And I just really started to explore food freedom, like actual food freedom, where the only rule was that there were no rules. And it was about letting go of extremes, letting go of this 0 or 100 pattern that I struggled with for so many years, especially as a perfectionist. And in the process, I also had to realize that balance doesn't truly exist in a perfect way. It's less about figuring out like a formula and more so about creating a baseline that feels really good and that also leaves room for, going out to eat with your friends, having the birthday cake or having that pastry, and just leaving room for fun and for connection around food. So for me, that year was really, really powerful. And through that process, I became very aware of my perfectionism, and that in seeking to be perfect and of doing things perfectly, it often caused me to go to these extremes, and it often caused me to want there to be a rule that I had to follow or a step-by-step plan or a step-by-step routine. When you try to live your life that way, it's really hard to keep it up for the long run because things happen, life happens. And so as different things come up, whether it's travel, something going on in your personal life or your work or your academics, if you are someone who has a very strict routine or lifestyle, that's gonna throw you off, and then you might fall to that mindset of, oh, I suck, oh, I clearly can't keep this up, I can't live a healthy lifestyle, I might as well throw it all out the window. And it's not about that, right? It's about leaving room for that flexibility so that you can go out to eat one day or have a Thanksgiving dinner or have a meal out or have the birthday cake or whatever it is, and the next day just go back to your normal. And so I started to really build that, and that's been the journey that I have been on for the last 2 years. And in this healthy baseline, what does my body look like? And really understanding that my healthiest body isn't my skinniest or my smallest body. And so in the process of figuring out what healthy meant for me, I also had to donate clothes that didn't fit me anymore, and I had to navigate the tendency to judge myself. I had to learn how to navigate my inner critic, and I had to realize that it's all about priorities. And as someone who prioritizes living a healthy lifestyle but also loves food and loves food freedom, I also have to accept the way that my body will look like when those are my priorities, instead of my priorities being the skinniest in the room. And so I had to really let go of this idea that I have to be perfect, because if I'm perfect, people will like me, people will love me, people will accept me. Letting go of this need to have no rolls in my stomach and to eat the same as everyone around me and to not be able to eat a little bit more than whoever I'm with. And I had to just let go of all of this BS. So that's really where the mental health side of things really matters, and the mindset piece is so important. And with all of this, there has been so many ups and downs. It's not like one day to the next you're healed. It's not like you restore your weight and you're all good. It's like you have to do the inner work. You have to implement mindset shifts. You have to change the way you talk to yourself. You have to reprioritize things. You have to test things out and start to learn how to listen to your body, because when you have been in this mindset of wanting to follow a rule, wanting to count all your calories, wanting to control things too much, you disconnect a little bit from your actual physical body and what it communicates to you. So the journey also has become for me about learning to listen, learning to honor when I'm hungry, honor when I'm full, and be more intuitive with how I connect with my physical body. So fast forward to now, November 2024, I can finally say that my relationship with my body and with food is healthy. And if you're someone who is struggling, just know that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And in the journey, there will be triggers. Even though I find my relationship with food and with my body now to be healthy, it doesn't mean that sometimes when I overhear someone else commenting on someone's food or someone's body, that it doesn't mess with me a little bit and it doesn't trigger certain feelings. I'm human, and I've had to learn how to navigate these triggers with grace and with kindness towards myself every single time that they've popped up. Trust me, they have popped up. But I can confidently say that arriving at this place that I am now at with my body has completely transformed my life for the better. And I see so many people falling to extremes because they're looking for quick fixes. They're looking to lose weight really fast or to change their body really fast, so they go to the extreme. They go to the really restrictive plan. But the issue is that when you do that, that plan is not gonna be sustainable. Eventually, something's gonna happen and you're not gonna be able to keep it up, so you're gonna go back to the way that you were living before. And you're gonna stay in that yo-yo. And so to me, when it comes down to ditching this restrictive lifestyle and cultivating a better relationship with food, what you really have to do is learn to create a healthy baseline. I'm a health coach. Like, I love to eat healthy. And the reason that I love it is because I have fun with the recipes that I cook. I make healthy eating taste good. I make it easy. I found workouts that I enjoy, that I like to do. I've found different practices that have helped me with the mental side of things, with my self-talk, whether that's affirmation work, journaling, speaking to myself more kindly. And I have really worked to surround myself with people who I find like me for me. And really understanding that the people who love me, they don't love me because of the way that I look. They love me because of who I am as a person. My body is just a vessel for my soul to have a human experience. And so I have learned to really have a lot of gratitude for my body and for my health and for everything that my body allows me to experience. It is the longer path. It is something that might take a little bit longer for you to build, and it's gonna come through baby steps and through a lot of self-compassion and through a lot of trial and error, but hopefully it'll then become the way that you just live your life. It'll just become your normal, and therefore you're going to be able to live a more effortlessly healthy lifestyle, which I think is what everyone wants at the end of the day. And now here we are. This is what I hope to share with my channel. This is what I hope to embody in my videos when I'm talking about food or recipes, and to hopefully inspire you in the process. So yeah, I don't count calories. I do care about protein, but I don't count my protein in an app, and I don't count my protein every single day. I just know that protein is important, so I prioritize it. But I'm not counting all my macros. I'm not tracking my food. I'm just learning to be intuitive and listening to my body and learning to enjoy eating. Because as I said in the beginning of the video, food is something we interact with day in and day out, whether you like it or not. It's a human thing, so you might as well work on your relationship with it so it's something that is pleasurable and fun and healthy for you, mentally and physically. If you stayed until the very end of the video, you are an OG. I love you. I'm so grateful you're here, and I'd be really curious to know how this video landed for you. If you learned something new, if it stirred up any emotions inside of you, or if you want to share anything that you've learned about your relationship with food and your body that's helped you find healing, drop that in the comments. If you're not yet subscribed, I would love to be YouTube friends with you, so hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. If you're choosing to watch this video, it means that you are looking for healing in some way or another, and for that, I'm already proud of you. If you're looking for more content like this, I have a podcast called Inner Growth. You can check that out. Hopefully that will provide you with a little bit more of a toolkit. I've had my podcast since 2021, so there's a lot of episodes out there. Hope you have a beautiful rest of your day. I'll see you guys next week with another video. I'm sending you a big virtual hug. Mwah. We did it! I'm so happy. I finally recorded this. Yay! It's been a long time coming, you guys. But I hope you feel a little bit more connected to me now. I definitely am proud of myself for recording this. And as you can see, after some time has passed, it becomes easier to talk about these things. Whereas like before, maybe I would get emotional. Now it feels so natural for me to open up about this. And that's on healing.